Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another edition of the Spurs Chat Podcast. I'm absolutely delighted to bring back to the channel Charlie Gordon, of course, senior sports reporter with the Daily Express, to talk about transfers. Of course, it is day 11 of the January transfer window and Spurs are very busy right now with players coming in and players going out the door. Charlie, great to have you back. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. Yeah, thanks very much for inviting me back on. It's been probably a couple of years since the first time I came on, and it was a pleasure the first time, so thanks very much.
A lot has happened since you were last on, I must say. Charlie, I was going to ask you, first of all, about what you've made of Spurs so far this season, but there has been some breaking news in the last few minutes from Sky Germany on Eric Dier. The contract now is believed to be 6 months until the end of the season with a 1-year option until 2025. The transfer fee will be 0 and Bayern will pay for matches and achievements after a specified period. The total amount should not exceed 3 to 3.5 million euros. He will not be in the squad for Bayern Munich's game against Hoffenheim on Friday. First of all, what do you make of this transfer, Eric Dier to Bayern Munich?
It's an interesting one. Like you say, that kind of unorthodox deal that you've just explained there, where he goes on a free. We're starting to see that kind of more and more recently. And it happens when a team has clearly got a player that's surplus to requirements and the top priority is to just shift them from the wage bill. So I think it's been clear since Ange came in, really, that Eric Dier doesn't fit into his system. He doesn't see him as a centre-back that's going to fit with his style of play in the long term. So I think the top priority for Spurs was to get him off the wage bill. He's quite a big earner. So I think just shifting him was the top priority. It's a good move for Dier, of course. Bayern Munich, massive club, gets a chance to kind of prove people wrong. Not played a lot of football this season and he's still... he's not too old. I think he's around 30, 29, 31, around that kind of age. So it's a good move for Dier. And I think just the fact that he's gone from Spurs in the nicest possible way makes it a good move for Tottenham as well.
Spurs seem to be being very clever in this transfer window. And of course, the previous window as well, the first one under Ange Postecoglou. Charlie, let's get straight into this. I want to ask you about Ange Postecoglou. When he was appointed as Spurs boss in the summer, and bearing in mind, we've gone through a couple of win now managers, Jose Mourinho, Antonio Conte, of course, Nuno was in between that as well. What did you make of the appointment at the time? And what do you make of Ange Postecoglou so far this season?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that he surpassed expectations pretty quickly. And I think he was a manager, maybe not, people didn't know too much about him because he's had quite a strange career path where he's been in Australia, he's been in Japan, and then, of course, he had that successful spell with Celtic, where I suppose fans in Britain will have got to know him somewhat. But yeah, it was an appointment where not everyone was going to be convinced straight away, but it was pretty clear after a few weeks when you kind of get to know Ange's personality, his style of play is so easy to get behind. And kind of when you see him in press conferences, having a laugh and a joke with the reporters, it makes him a manager that's very easy to engage with as a fan. I would imagine as a player, they enjoy playing for him. And it's clear his tactics are really interesting, Chris, I think. And I think that was the game that really exemplified that was against City at the Etihad. It was kind of do or die. It was very gutsy to play that way. And that just sums up what Ange believes in. He's going to live and die by his tactics. It's kind of go for broke. And I think many neutrals are pleased to have Ange in the Premier League because it's made it a lot more exciting.
Absolutely. I think Spurs are like everyone's second team. They always tune in to watch Tottenham because of the entertaining style. And I think there's a lot more to come as well. Charlie, what do you make of Tottenham in the transfer market when Ange Postecoglou arrived? Because it's fair to say in previous transfer windows under multiple different managers in previous years, Spurs have always left it to the last minute. But we got deals done very early on in the summer. Of course, we changed the whole spine of the team. Vicario coming in, Van der Ven coming in, Maddison, of course, Son now or played centrally. Of course, Harry Kane left. What have you made of Tottenham's transfer business in the summer, and what have you made of Tottenham's transfer business so far in these 11 days? Because, of course, we're still waiting for the official announcement for Dragusin. But, of course, we've got Timo Werner over the line.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting and important point that you just brought up there about the fact Spurs have got a lot of business done early in this January transfer window, and it really sets them apart from every other team in the Premier League. There's just not been that much activity. We're 11 days in now, not that far from the halfway point. And I think as of today, maybe Sheffield United were the only other Prem team to have actually signed a player so far. That's what I read anyway. And Spurs.
Why do you think that is?
I don't really know. It's just, it's always been a case of mid-season, it's harder to get players away from their clubs. And I think it's just more importance being placed in the summer now. Premier League clubs, there's an awful lot of planning that goes into these transfer strategies. And I think most of that planning is geared towards the summer, not the winter. So January window has always been more of a reactive transfer market, and Spurs, their circumstances just dictate that they had to be reactive. So many injuries and that kind of thing, gaps that needed to be filled. But the real striking thing with Tottenham, I think, this month is we read from the start, in the lead up to January, they needed three things done: centre-back, a versatile attacker, and a centre midfielder. We're 11 days in. A lot of other teams are kind of sat there waiting. They've not really acted decisively as yet. Spurs are about to tick off two of those three items on their to-do list as long as the Dragusin deal goes through. So you have to commend it, really. And I think it just sums up the faith that Daniel Levy's got in Postecoglou. After just a few months in the job, he's kind of clearly come to the conclusion that he's worth backing and not leaving it till the final day. As you said, it's happened so often in the past.
What's changed then, Charlie, in your opinion? Why is this different now under Postecoglou with the Borden hierarchy? Why is it different?
Why is it different? I mean, the clear change with Ange compared to Antonio Conte is he doesn't tend to roll people up the wrong way enough. Not enough, sorry. He doesn't roll people up the wrong way in the same way that Conte did. I think it's clear that Ange, he's got the fans on side. He's got the players on side. And I think a really important quality to have as a manager, Chris, is improving players. You see in some clubs, like take Chelsea for an example, players are going to Chelsea over the last few years and they're getting worse, if anything.
Yeah.
It's really important to have a manager who a player can come in, you'll improve them. And then worst case scenario, 2 years down the line, you sell them on for a profit. Best case scenario, they stay at the club for 5 years and become a great player. And I think Ange has taken a few Spurs players who were underperforming under Conte, and he's really improved them this season. And that's, I think, instilled a lot of confidence in the Tottenham hierarchy that they can spend money on players and, maybe in a few years' time, Ange will improve them to the point where they're going to be worth a lot more money.
We know, of course, that Ange Postecoglou is bringing in a number of young, very talented players. We also know that his man management style is absolutely excellent because he seems to FaceTime and talk to players on the phone on a regular basis before we sign them, to learn about their personality. It's very, very important for him. Have you known this type of thing to happen before when managers want to sign players? Because when you think about it, Charlie, it seems very straightforward. It seems very normal, but does everyone do it or not?
Well, the thing is, as time goes on, it seems like managers are becoming more and more detached from transfers. 20 years ago, your Sir Alex Ferguson's, your managers like that, they'd be all over transfers. It'd be like a one-man transfer department. These days, at top clubs, you've got teams of recruitment specialists, you've got sporting directors, head scouts, things like that. And it's like a massive department now, all working together. But as you say, it is important sometimes to just take it back to the basics. It's important for a player coming in. Take Timo Werner as an example. It's clearly important for them to know that they're wanted by the manager. Werner, he was in a bit of a frustrating spell with Leipzig where he's not played a whole lot this season.
Mm.
And obviously coming back to the Premier League is a gamble for Werner. I'm sure we'll talk about him a bit more later. But so he will obviously have wanted some assurances from Ange before taking that gamble and coming back to the Premier League, where it didn't really work out for him the first time. So I think in some ways it's taking it back to basics for Postecoglou, and it's refreshing to see. And I'm sure, like you say, it's really effective at kind of luring players towards Tottenham.
Charlie, obviously a lot has changed on the pitch, and of course Postecoglou came in the summer, but a lot has changed off the pitch as well. Fabio Pracci is still working for the club on a consultant basis. Scott Munn's come in. Johan Lang has come in from Aston Villa as well. How much of a say and how much involvement do you think Daniel Levy has still got in transfers, or is it now left to these guys who I've mentioned?
I think just looking at it from a logical point of view, Spurs have put these specialists in charge because it's what they do. It's what they've made their name doing. Johan Lange's got a great reputation. Just looked at some of the players he signed for Villa earlier on. Boubacar Kamara on a free transfer looks like a top piece of business. Ashley Young on a free turned out to be a really good signing as well. Ollie Watkins, Emi Martinez, players like this. So his track record at Villa was really good. Scott Munn, like you say, he's got serious pedigree at the very top level. So just from a logical point of view, I think Daniel Levy, he'd still obviously be consulted over big decisions. And maybe it's a case of just him having to sign off, having the final say perhaps. But in terms of who's doing most of the legwork, the research, coming up with the short lists, and probably liaising with Ange Postecoglou the most, it is the men, like you said, Johan Lange and Scott Munn. I would imagine they're the most heavily involved.
Charlie, of course, as I mentioned, and you've already mentioned him already, Timo Werner, a loan signing from RB Leipzig. We have a buy option at the end of the season in the summer for 17 million euros. What did you make of this signing? Because I tell you what, it did come as a bit of a surprise to a lot of Spurs fans, a lot of pundits, a lot of journalists like yourself. It came out of nowhere. What do you make of this signing? Because there are a few doubters. Of course, he had a tough spell at Chelsea, but he still scored goals. He still provided assists. And of course, he wants to go to the Euros in the summer.
It's a really interesting transfer. I think it's going to take some beating between now and the end of the month in terms of, one that's come out of the blue, one that was pretty unexpected. And like you say, I think his numbers at Chelsea weren't too bad. They weren't disastrous by any stretch of the imagination. But the thing that sticks out in the memory is that his finishing was poor. I don't think anyone can dispute that. And it's something that he'll want to put that right, because his track record in Germany is really good. If you look a few years ago when he was at RB Leipzig, before Chelsea shelled out £45 million for him, his record was unbelievable. I think it was 90-something goals in 150 games, something along those lines. Really, really good record. And, we read before the start of January, Tottenham wanted a versatile attacker. And Werner does fit that bill. He can play through the middle. He's got the pace and the energy to play off the left as well. And he is also one of those players, Chris, where it's not just goals that he brings. Like, he makes a lot of runs throughout the game. His energy is brilliant. And these are two qualities that I think are growing in importance in modern football. Managers love players that can stretch defenses like that. And have that level of work rate. So it's interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how it pans out. And the important thing is that this is a low risk transfer for Tottenham. He's there for the next 6 months. If it doesn't work out, he goes back to Leipzig. You draw a line under it. You say that didn't work out, and that's fine. If it does work out, you can buy him for 15 million, which is peanuts in this day and age. It really is. And then everyone's saying, pat on the back, well done, Tottenham, a good piece of transfer business. So, it's going to be an interesting one between now and the end of the season to see how it pans out.
Charlie, why do you think that figure is so low? Because if this loan spell does work out in the summer, that is going to be some serious business for Spurs, very, very cheap.
It is. It's hard to figure out really why the sum is so low, because he obviously went back to Leipzig a couple of years ago. Again, the numbers he put up there weren't terrible by any stretch. something like 11 goals in 35 league games, something along those lines. And again, 15 million, sorry. It is absolute peanuts by modern standards. I think part of the reason is he's not played a lot of football this season. A few injuries, only played 8 games in the league, I think, scored twice. And with RB Leipzig, I believe they've got a really good striker, Lois Openda, scoring loads of goals this season. So for Leipzig, it could be a case for them of just taking the money while they can and reinvesting it in the summer if Werner does end up moving to Spurs on a permanent basis. But again, I'm with you. It does seem really low considering he went to Chelsea for 45 million a few years ago, and the market has inflated a lot since then. And you look at the other striker options that are out there. I'm not saying he's as good as an Ivan Toney or an Osimhen, or he's not at that level, but they're quoted for 100 plus million. We're talking fractions of that with Werner. So I think anyone would admit that Spurs, in terms of where Werner's valuation is, they've definitely gone in at the low end and managed to get a good deal.
Charlie, we know that Ange Postecoglou, when he signs a player, he loves them to be versatile. Now, talking about Timo Werner, we know that he can play on the left, on the right, and through the centre, as you've said. I'm with you. I don't think that Timo Werner is coming in to score 30 goals a season. I think he's just going to be a very, very hard-working player, a versatile player. But where do you see him fitting in to this Ange Postecoglou side? Where is he going to get the game time? Because apparently Spurs have told RB Leipzig he is going to get game time. So we're not expecting him to be on the bench. We're expecting him to see him get a lot of minutes at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium.
Yeah, I expect him to begin on the bench, but I say that, but we have to remember that Heung-min Son obviously is away at the Asian Cup, possibly until February the 10th. We've got 5 games between now and then, presuming that South Korea make the final, which of course they might not do. So if Werner is going to get some game time, if he is going to cement a spot in the starting 11, he's got to hit the ground running, really. And like I said, he's not played an awful lot of football in Germany this season, so it's going to be a big ask for him to acclimatise straight away. But if he's going to get a chance, his best chance is going to come while Son is away, because even if everyone's available for Postecoglou, you'd imagine Heung-min Son, Richarlison, Kulusevski, Maddison, they're all going to be probably ahead of Werner in the pecking order, and unless something happens over the next few weeks. And in terms of exactly where Werner could play, I think it's all up in the air at the moment. I think Ange is still experimenting a little bit. We've seen Son up front this season. We've seen him on the left. And I thought he looks extremely dangerous on the left. We've seen him there for years, obviously. But just earlier this season, we were praising Son for how well he'd handled, transitioning back into that central role. And it's the same with Richarlison. Some games you see him play brilliantly up front. Others, you think he's better suited to being out on the left. So I'm sure Ange is going to experiment with Werner, try him out wide, try him through the middle, see what works. And I think it's an exciting attack with Tottenham. They've got so many versatile players, very fluid. So, yeah, we'll see how it all pans out, how that pecking order kind of establishes itself over the next few weeks.
Charlie, there's a lot of people in the comments right now a little bit worried that Spurs have not officially announced Radu Dragusin's transfer from Genoa, believed to be 30 million euros plus 5 million euros in add-ons. And of course, Jed Spence going the other way on loan with an option to buy. Why do you think that this has not been announced yet? Because we got Here We Go yesterday from Fabrizio Romano in the morning. Fabrizio Romano earlier today has stated that Dragusin will wear the number 6 shirt at Tottenham. Is there anything to worry about, or is it just a case of contracts still being sorted, interviews still being recorded, etc.?
I don't want to put my neck too much on the line here, but I don't think Tottenham fans have got too much to worry about. I think, the things that has been said by Dragusin's agent, it's beyond the point of no return now. If this move was to fall apart, it would be a sensational, spectacular kind of, explosion, the like of which we've not seen for a long time, because for all intents and purposes, it seems like a done deal. His agent said in plain terms, we're going to Tottenham. We've rejected Bayern Munich. And Bayern were the major threat in negotiations. But Dragusin, he gave his word to Tottenham and he stuck by it. I'm sure the fans will respect him for that. It's it's a bold call. But yeah, Timo Werner was announced today, wasn't he, Chris? Was it today or yesterday?
Yesterday. Oh, sorry, the day before yesterday.
Oh, was it? Apology. Okay, yeah. I stand corrected then. But I thought it might be a case of just trying to stagger the announcements a little bit. But it will just be formalities at this stage. Everything's agreed with the player, with Genoa. And I'm sure it'll be a sweetener for Genoa that Jed Spence is going in the other direction. Talented player. They're obviously not getting that element of the deal if they go and negotiate with a different club. So, yeah, I think this is too advanced for Spurs for the deal to blow up, and I expect it to be announced probably tomorrow.
Charlie, there's a couple of things I want to pick you up on there. You mentioned Radu Dragusin's agent. He come out and said, we are at the beginning of the road. We want him to reach the best teams in the world. We were close with Bayern, but his dream is Real Madrid or Barcelona. How unprofessional is this to act as an agent before the official announcement at his next club?
I don't think it's going to go down well with Tottenham. I'll put it that way. It's quite unusual, really, to see an agent speaking publicly to the press, using their quotes in articles and stuff. It's quite unusual to see that. And with how open his agent's been with the whole Bayern Munich thing, the Tottenham thing, he made it quite clear that there was a real temptation to take the Bayern offer and not the Tottenham offer. And it's strange that he would put that in the open, considering, he's about to join Tottenham possibly for many years, and he's trying to endear himself to the fans. And yeah, like you say, the comment about Real Madrid and Barcelona, a very strange one, really, because Tottenham, they're well in contention for a Champions League place this season, mixing it with the big teams. Really exciting manager to play under in Ange Postecoglou. So it's a very strange, I agree with you, very strange comments from the agent. And I'm not surprised if it's rolled up more than a few Tottenham fans.
Also, what do you make of the apparent reluctance of Jed Spence wanting to join Genoa? Because, of course, Spurs are now covering his wages whilst he's on loan. And then, of course, they're going to have an option. Jed Spence has had a pretty tough time since joining Tottenham. He was a club signing, as said Antonio Conte on a number of occasions. He's had a couple of loan spells. Daniel Clarke, in the last week or so, Leeds United boss, turned around and said that he was very disappointed in the way that he conducts himself, unprofessional, etc. What do you make of this loan spell again for Genoa with Jed Spence? Because there's a long way to go before Genoa are actually going to give that money of 10 million euros to get that deal, permanent in the summer, isn't there? He's going to have to really work hard and knuckle down. But what do you make of the reluctance of him wanting to go and then him actually going?
I think it's important to think about this deal from Jed Spence's point of view. His career, he thought he would have been a Premier League regular by now. A couple of years ago at Middlesbrough, I was so impressed by him at Middlesbrough. On loan at Forest, I should say. That was when he, with the promotion push in the Championship, he was brilliant for them. Obviously, £20 million or so moved to Tottenham. Clearly was not favoured by Antonio Conte when he first moved there. Couple of loan spells, Rennes and Leeds United, they've not worked, and he's kind of in a mad scramble to get his career back on track, Jed Spence, before people start to lose faith in him. So I don't blame him for wanting to make sure that his next move is the right move, because it's almost like, with each different loan spell that doesn't work out, it's more like a black mark against his name. Like, oh, maybe we don't want to sign this player. He wants his next move to be a success. And whether that's going to be at Genoa, we'll see. But like I say, he's a really talented player, Jed Spence. And it's disappointing, really, to see that it's not worked out for him at Tottenham. And I'm very surprised that it didn't work out for him at Leeds as well, because he was so effective in the Championship just a couple of years ago. So if this loan move to Genoa does go to plan, I'm sure they'll take that buy option in the summer, because it's very cheap, about £8 to £9 million, I believe. So yeah, we'll see how that one goes.
Charlie, what do you make of Tottenham's second signing? Hopefully, we'll get the announcement this evening. But Radu Dragusin, 21 years old, highly rated. And, when you look at his stats, they are incredible. No one seems to be able to dribble past him in Serie A. And, everyone who talks about him says he's a mature, professional 21-year-old. What do you know about him?
Yeah, I think that's the key word is pace. And it's difficult to dribble past him. And that's so important in Ange Postecoglou's system, his tactics, the way he plays, is, it's death-defying football. And occasionally your defenders are going to get left exposed. They're going to have to be confident in 1v1 situations like Mickey van der Ven is, like Christian Romero is. And I think Dragusin does fit into that mould. We've seen him heard him compared to Virgil van Dijk, the Romanian Van Dijk. That's, I believe, what he's known as. Obviously, he's got some way to go before he kind of lives up to that tag. But I think that tells you a lot about his attributes. A brilliant athlete, 6'3" tall, and of course, only 21 years old. So it's exciting, really, to be a Serie A regular at 21 years old at centre back as well. That's impressive in itself. Obviously, not many people are going to have watched loads of him, only just breaking into senior football in Italy. But it's a deal that's got Fabio Paratici's imprint all over it. He took into Juventus when he was a teenager, like he said, still working with the club. So I'm sure Paratici's had something to do with this one. And like you say, lots of fans and experts in Italy really excited about Dragusin, and clearly big clubs were tailing him as well. Bayern Munich wanted him, didn't get him. So it's going to be interesting to see how it works out. He's not going to go straight into the starting 11, Chris, I don't think. He's got a job on his hands getting past Van der Ven and Romero. But like we've seen this season, they've both missed games through injuries, through suspensions. So he might get a chance to impress soon enough. And I'm sure Spurs fans will be keen to see what he's made of.
I wouldn't be at all surprised, Charlie, to see Timo Werner and Dragusin both in the starting 11 on Sunday. Because, of course, Romero is back in contention, but he's just come back from injury. Mickey van der Ven's been training for the last couple of weeks. Of course, Son is off with the Asian Games. So I wouldn't be at all surprised that Postecoglou puts them straight in. And I'd be very excited by that at Old Trafford, because you never know what's going to happen there. Literally in the last couple of minutes, Fabrizio Romano has just tweeted, Jed Spence has just signed the contract as new Genoa player on loan from Spurs. So I would now expect... I would expect the Spurs would have waited for that news that Jed Spence has actually signed the deal and then announced Dragusin. So I would think that would happen very, very soon. Charlie, what else do you think that Ange Postecoglou wants in this transfer window before the 1st of Feb to make it a perfect window for him? Because he must be extremely pleased with the business that we have done so far. He said in press conferences, he said a number of occasions that he wants deals done early. Spurs have acted in a very professional way, in my opinion, got these deals done, very clever business. And, even getting players out the door, even players like Hugo Lloris on huge wages, get them out the door because surplus to requirements. Ange Postecoglou was never going to use Lloris, and he didn't really want to use Dier, as you mentioned already. But what else do you think he needs?
I think from what was said before January, he wants a centre midfielder, but I don't think it's a case of adding a centre midfielder to what he's already got. It's probably going to be a one in, one out situation from what it sounds like. Hojbjerg is not playing regularly. He's a great. I really rate him as a player, Hojbjerg, and I think he can go elsewhere into a system where he fits better, and it'll probably be a first team regular. And there is interest in him. It seems like with Hojbjerg, he's on a lot of transfer shortlists for different clubs, but he's rarely top of the wish list, which is why we've not seen anything concrete happen there. It may be a case of late in January we see something happen in that regard, because I'm sure Hojbjerg will want first team minutes, and that's not guaranteed at Tottenham for the remainder of the season. In terms of who could come in as that extra midfielder, if it does get to that point, obviously Conor Gallagher is the name that we've seen bandied about so much. It's going to be really difficult to get him out of Chelsea, I think, midway through the season. The reason his name keeps getting brought up with the suggestion that Chelsea could actually sell him is because he's an academy product. So if Chelsea sell him, it's going to help massively with their financial fair play situation. All that money, 45 million is what they want for him. It goes down as pure profit for Chelsea. Obviously, it's a lot of money mid-season for Tottenham to pay. He's a top player, Conor Gallagher, lots of energy and kind of leadership qualities already in the middle of the park, only 23 years old. For me, though, Chris, I think that one's probably going to wait until the summer just because of the difficulty of getting Gallagher out of Stamford Bridge. But, of course, there's always the possibility of Spurs looking at other options in the middle of the park. But I think, yeah, Gallagher's the name that just keeps popping up this month. And if you were to say to Ange, you know, what would make it a perfect January, I think probably getting Conor Gallagher in and Hojbjerg out, that's probably what he would say.
I'm just very doubtful of Spurs and Chelsea doing business with one another. I can't see it happening, to be honest, Charlie. Tottenham Hotspur have just literally released the following statement. Jed Spence has joined Serie A side Genoa on loan for the remainder of the 2023-2024 season. The 23-year-old fullback spent the first half of the campaign on loan at Championship side Leeds United, where he made 7 appearances. So that is now confirmed. So hopefully we will get the confirmation of the Dragusin deal very, very soon. Charlie, with midfielders, is it a case of Ange Postecoglou wanting a midfielder that is going to go straight into the team, or another young and up-and-coming player? Because we've been linked to Blackburn midfielder Adam Morton, of course, 19 years old. Hayden Hackney from Middlesbrough, he's only 21 years old. Is there any truth in any of these rumours that you know?
It's the first I've heard of them, but it wouldn't surprise me to see Spurs go after that kind of profile of player, because it might be a little bit foolish splashing out loads of money on a midfielder who you'd expect and who he expects to go straight into the starting 11. And that's because, obviously, when they're back from the Africa Cup of Nations, Yves Bissouma, Pape Sarr, you know, they're going to expect to go back in because they've performed so well already this season. So obviously, I think Ange will want a player that he's senior enough to fill in over the next few weeks. But the caliber of player where they're not going to kick up a fuss and disrupt the dressing room if in a few weeks' time, when Bissouma and Sarr return, they find themselves dropped on the bench. So yeah, those 2 players there, Wharton and Hackney, it's the first I've heard of it, but it doesn't surprise me to see Spurs going after that caliber of player. And I think it would be smart business as well in the long term.
We're certainly planning for the future, and that is great to see at the football club. What I wanted to ask you about is Pierre-Emile Hojbjerg, because the 2 players I've noticed all season, when Spurs have won games and it seemed like that party atmosphere at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, and of course the celebrations at the away games when we've won games as well, Pierre-Emile Hojbjerg and Eric Dier, they were the only 2 players that didn't really mix with the celebrations, and Pierre-Emile Hojbjerg is normally the first one to walk down the tunnel at home games. He has been linked to the likes of Atletico Madrid, Juventus, Ajax. Can you see a deal getting over the line before the 1st of Feb for Hojbjerg? Because I think it's pretty obvious he wants out.
Yeah, I think he wants out. And I think Ange Postecoglou, with his selection habits, he's made it clear that Hojbjerg's not going to be in his long-term plans. You know, his profile is totally different to a Bissouma or a Sarr. He's not a dribbler. He sits deep, he passes. And he's a brilliant passer of the ball, which is why, like he said, he's got lots of suitors, the likes of Atletico Madrid, Ajax, even Manchester United, rumoured to be fond of him. But yeah, like I said before, he's rarely the top of the wish list, which is why I think it's going to go, if he does get his move away, and it's currently on the fence whether he will get his move away, but if he does, I see it going late in January. If, let's say, a big team doesn't get their first choice midfielder, maybe they put in a bid for Hojbjerg. And I think over the last year or so, when it's become clear that Hojbjerg could be sold by Tottenham, the price tag that's been pinned on him is quite high. I think it started around 40 million maybe a year ago, down to around 20-25 million now. And I'm sure that's put a few teams off. I saw a report that said Juventus were exploring it this month, but they were put off by the financial commitments involved in the deal. So it's going to depend on the asking price. And I think if it does happen, it's going to go on really late in the January transfer window.
Charlie, I have seen many reports in the last couple of weeks from various different publications and outlets stating that Spurs might be looking at bringing 2 defenders in this January transfer window, or indeed bringing another defender in the summer. Have you any names to bring us that Spurs have been looking at and interested in?
There was a long shortlist that I believe Spurs were looking at ahead of January. The likes of Lloyd Kelly, I remember being on there. Mark Gurhey, excuse me. Wow. But yeah, these players like Gurhey, lots of top teams after him: Arsenal, Chelsea, Manchester United. £60 million price tag. This is the kind of player, and the fact he's so crucial to Crystal Palace as well. He's the kind of player where it's almost impossible to prize him away mid-season. But yeah, I've seen Lloyd Kelly mentioned, Mark Gurhey, Jared Branthwaite of Everton.
Yep.
Another player that I've seen linked. He looks really impressive. Still really young, which I think goes under the radar. His name hasn't been in the headlines all that much this season, but he's kind of slotted into that Everton back line seamlessly. Big towering guy, 6'5", thrived on loan at PSV last season. So he's a player that's worth keeping an eye on. And the same with Lloyd Kelly as well, like I just mentioned, because he's coming to the end of his contract, I believe. Lots of big teams keeping an eye on him. So yeah, it wouldn't be a surprise at all to see Spurs go after another centre-back in the summer. Obviously, Ashley Phillips, a player that he signed in the summer, just gone. So young, though, 18 years old. He's one that you're banking on for the future, but it seems like he's obviously not quite ready to go into the starting 11 just yet, which is why they've sent him on loan to Plymouth for the rest of the season. But yeah, I think Lloyd Kelly, Branthwaite, and Mark Gurhey wants to keep an eye on. Jean-Claire Todibo as well, another name. I know Spurs fans will have seen that linked at the start of January. At the top of a lot of wish lists. Man United like him, but he's going to be really difficult to get hold of, and the competition's going to be really fierce with that one.
Charlie, can I just go back to Timo Werner, because of course Manchester United were heavily linked to Werner. Why did that break down and he didn't go to Manchester United? He ended up coming to Tottenham.
I think, well, there was no indication that Man United actually made a concrete move for him. Spurs got in there quickly. With United, it seems like they want a striker on loan. Choupo-Moting's another one that's been mentioned, but they've not actually done anything concretely to kind of achieve their aim as yet. It seems like they were more focused on outgoings. We've seen Jadon Sancho to Dortmund announced today. Maybe they'll step up their own striker search. But if I was Werner, to be honest, Spurs is a more a less hostile environment to go into at this stage of the season. Not many United attackers are thriving this campaign. It's fair to say that. And with Werner, I think with his pace and his energy, he probably just fancied playing for Ange Postecoglou more than he did for Erik ten Hag. But I mean, the reason why we didn't see an all-out transfer battle there is, we just didn't see anything to indicate that United had submitted a concrete offer. Spurs got in there first. And in the end, I think it's the right move for Werner regardless.
Well, Werner said he wants to win titles, so he's come to Tottenham rather than Manchester United. How the tides have changed, eh?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There's United are just so far off it at the moment. Spurs, at the start of the season, people were talking about the title for Spurs. When Ange, first 10 games, 26 points, no manager making their first entry into the Premier League had ever put together a record like that. And even though people aren't talking about title at the moment, personally, I wouldn't back Spurs for the title. But they're only 6 points off, Chris. That's the thing. They're 6 points off. It's just squad depth is the issue, I feel, at the moment. To compete with your Liverpools, your Arsenals, your Manchester Cities, it's squad depth. And that's something that's being worked on clearly in this January transfer window with how busy Spurs have been. And the project's going to continue in the summer. But, no one's willing to take the bull by the horns this season, but in the Premier League. Any other season, you'd likely have seen one of the big teams streak away into the distance, but it's just not happened. And if Spurs can put together a run like they did at the start of the season, once the big players return to fitness, like you never know how the table's going to look in a few weeks' time.
I agree. It feels very exciting, especially the way that Ange is being backed in these transfer windows. Charlie, another player who has returned from a loan spell, Sergio Reguilon, just returned from Old Trafford. He is being linked now to Dortmund and various other Premier League clubs. What do you make of Sergio Reguilon's time at Manchester United? And now he's come back. Of course, Manchester United sent him back because Spurs didn't recall him. And now Tottenham are actively trying to get either a loan or a permanent move for him. I think the way that Spurs are going, it's probably wanting to be a permanent move rather than a loan, because in recent seasons, we seem to have loaned so many players out. But sometimes you just need to get these players out the door when they are surplus to the manager's requirements. So, you have any update on Sergio Reguilon's situation?
I did. I mean, I looked through a lot of Tottenham players, fringe players, ones that you'd expect to be moved on before the end of the month. The only thing I wrote next to Reguilon's name was radio silence, because we've not heard a lot. We've not heard a lot about Reguilon. When he went to Manchester United, that was a big opportunity for him. We knew he was going to get some game time to impress at a really big team, at a team where so many eyes were always going to be on them over the first few weeks of the season. And it's strange with Reguilon, because I think he's just his standards have deteriorated over the last couple of seasons. When he first got to Tottenham, the early signs were really promising. I thought when I first watched him, I thought he looked a really exciting player, but it's kind of gone downhill from there. And I think Spurs have seen enough since they signed him over the last few years to determine that he's not going to be their starting left back. Obviously, Destiny Udogi's been fantastic this season. Reguilon's never going to fight his way past him. And like you say, if you are able to sort out a permanent exit for Reguilon, that would definitely be preferable to a loan, because you just don't want to be spinning that many plates. It's just one more thing to keep on track of, one more to-do list item, during the summer transfer window. So I'm sure there's plenty of time left in January. Reguilon, he's got serious pedigree. Played for United, played for Tottenham, came through at Real Madrid, Sevilla, played fantastically a few years ago. So I'm sure there will be teams looking to take a chance on him. Like you said, Borussia Dortmund linked at the moment. So I do expect something to happen there before the end of the month. But I was surprised to have a look around and see that there's just not been that much noise around Reguilon over the last few days.
Ryan Sessegnon had a sub-appearance against Burnley last week. His first appearance in a Tottenham Hotspur shirt for 11 months. Now, clubs were interested in him in the summer, and then he got injured again. So, of course, that scuppered a move away. Would you expect Ryan Sessegnon to possibly move from Spurs in this January transfer window, or indeed the summer?
I think I would expect Sessegnon to stay, to be honest. I mean, he's a player that's not been given a chance yet under Postecoglou. We've not really seen what he can do in this new system. Like you said, he's been out injured so long. And the thing with Udogi, what's made him such a success is that he can dribble past players. He's quite an unpredictable, a raw talent. And opposition players don't really know how to defend him because his movements are so out of the ordinary for a left back. And Sessegnon shares some commonalities there in that we know that he can play as a more attacking left-sided player. He did it at Fulham when he was coming through in the Championship. He was playing even as a second striker sometimes, scoring quite a few goals as well. So we know Sessegnon has got that ability to play further at the field and affect the game going forward, even if Tottenham fans haven't seen it as much as they would like, since he arrived at the club. But I wouldn't expect him to move in January. I'd expect him to kind of be given a chance as a deputy over the next few months and then perhaps reassess in the summer.
Charlie, another player that has had a couple of loan spells away from Spurs and never really had a good run in the team, Bryan Gil. And of course, he's played under various different managers. Apparently, he's happy at Spurs right now, but a couple of clubs have come calling for him with a possible loan from now until the end of the season, Fiorentina and Feyenoord. Can you see this one happening? And do you think it's beneficial for the club and the player just to keep having loan spells rather than actually selling them permanently so everyone knows exactly where they stand?
It's a tricky one. I think for me, it's a concerning one for Tottenham, the case of Bryan Gil, because he's not shown enough for me. He's primarily been an impact sub off the bench. And he doesn't seem to affect games as much as he should, particularly considering the money that Tottenham paid in terms of, what the whole package was worth. It was Lamela plus quite a considerable sum of money, wasn't it, when you signed him? And it's obviously physicality is an issue for Bryan Gil. I think that's quite obvious when you see him play. He's not got the physicality of a lot of Premier League wingers. He's still young, of course, but he's getting to the age now where he should be doing more than what he is doing for Tottenham. But if they were looking to sell him on, they'd want to see Gil perform really well on loan somewhere so that he could drive up his transfer value. And I don't see him driving up his transfer value over the rest of the season with Spurs, because he is a fair way down the pecking order, and because he's kind of not shown that he's capable of scoring lots of goals, getting a lot of assists, tearing defenders to shreds in the Premier League. We've not really seen that from Gil. Even if we've seen it in flashes, Chris, we've seen the odd flash. I think that's what's frustrating with Gil, is you've seen it, the odd flash where you think, wow, if he did that on a week in, week out basis, he'd be a great player to have in the side, but he just doesn't do it consistently enough for me.
I agree with you to a point, but I just think that if you're going to send a player like Bryan Gil out on loan, why not do it to a Premier League club? Why do you think that has not been explored? Because if you're going to loan him out, he needs experience in the Premier League.
You make a really good point, and I think that depends on the interest that Tottenham have had from Premier League clubs. Whether they have, I can't say whether they've been inundated with inquiries from Premier League clubs about taking Bryan Gil on loan, or whether it's more, teams in La Liga looking to bring him back where he's got a more proven track record. It could be a case of, obviously, if Bryan Gil were to leave Tottenham, he'd be looking lower down the table to get more game time. And it could be a case of teams down there, are they going to bank on Bryan Gil to get them out of a relegation scrap? Have they seen enough of what he can do at Tottenham to really, hedge their bets on Bryan Gil? Possibly not. And that I think that's why we're seeing him linked with moves abroad. But if he were to get in a situation where he could bank minutes in the Premier League, that would be hugely beneficial for Tottenham to see over the span of a season, given regular game time, what can he do? Kind of no excuses. You're in the starting 11 and he's got to show what he can do. But like you say, we're not seeing a lot of noise with Premier League links. It looks more like it would be abroad if it was going to be another loan deal.
Charlie, Richarlison has had a couple of links to Saudi clubs. Now, of course, I don't think he's going to be going anywhere in this January transfer window, but do you think that he could possibly be on the move out of Spurs in the summer? Of course, he's been in good form in the Premier League for Tottenham, 5 in his last 5. But he's had a pretty tough time since arriving from Everton. He's had a lot of injury problems as well, but Ange Postecoglou seems to be trusting him at the moment. And do you think that Ange is, fully confident with Richarlison going forward beyond the summer, or do you think that he will end up leaving in the summer?
From Richarlison's point of view, obviously I don't know him personally, but I get the impression that the football is the most important thing to him, and it's not the money. When you're talking about a move to the Saudi Pro League, a lot of players are going there because of the big payday. I think Richarlison, that slump that he had in his career, the first season at Tottenham, where it was so disappointing, I think that clearly affected him. And the fact that he's just returned to good form now, he's not going to want to jeopardise that with a move away. If he can continue this form for Tottenham, finish the season in double figures in the Premier League, and nail down a spot in the starting 11, I don't think he's going to want to, trade that for a move to Saudi. I think he's still very ambitious. He certainly will want to preserve his spot in the Brazilian national team squad, and I think a move to Saudi Arabia wouldn't necessarily help him do that. Playing regularly in the Premier League would be more helpful in terms of keeping him in the Brazilian squad. So I would be surprised to see Richarlison leave, just because of the fact it's taken him so long to really find that rhythm at Tottenham. All of a sudden he's found it now, and I'm sure he's going to want to keep hold of that. And I'm sure Ange Postecoglou is going to want to extend that for as long as possible too.
Charlie, I've seen a number of links to Giovanni Lo Celso. Of course, he's had a couple of loan spells at Villarreal. He's had a difficult time at Spurs as well, trying to nail down that first team spot on a regular basis. Lots of injury issues. But he's played a fair bit under Ange Postecoglou. And, Ange, it's fair to say, he's given him a really good chance and opportunity for him to grab. But unfortunately, he just keeps picking up these injuries. He's injured again. He's not going to be featuring in the Manchester United game on Sunday. With these links to Barcelona, can you see anything happening there? Because, of course, when a club like Barcelona come calling and they put a bid in and they sniff around with interest, it could turn ahead.
It certainly could, yeah. But I think Tottenham would put the brakes on it in January. I can't see, that would be more likely a move for the summer if it was going to materialise. James Maddison's so important for Tottenham. We've only seen him the first few weeks of the season, but he was so effective in that number 10 role. And I think behind him, obviously you've got Kulusevski. You can draft him into a central area, but Lo Celso is the most natural replacement for Maddison if he does get injured. And like you say, I think he's done reasonably well since he's come into the team following Maddison's injury. But just considering the sum of money and the reputation, Spurs paid a huge amount of money a few years ago to get him close to 60 million. You see different numbers bandied about when it comes to the Lo Celso signing. But, you kind of expect to see more from him. He's clearly a talented player, lots of technical ability. It just happens that his work isn't as eye-catching as what you see with James Maddison. When you see Maddison in that number 10 role, it's like poetry in motion. The way he glides around the pitch, spraying passes, playing balls behind the last line of defence. With Lo Celso, it's a bit more subtle. I know I'm on here to talk, Chris, but I'm interested, actually. What have you made of Lo Celso over the past few weeks?
I've said in the last couple of weeks, actually, Charlie, I've never been Lo Celso's biggest fan. And the performances that he has put in under Ange Postecoglou in the last couple of months when he's been on the pitch, I've been very, very impressed. I've been very impressed with his change in attitude and what he's given us on the pitch. But it is really frustrating seeing these injuries constantly, again and again and again, because you think he's back in the team. And I feel like Ange feels a little bit like that as well. Like, you get someone back in the team, you want that rhythm, you want that consistency, and it never has been there with Giovanni Lo Celso. And I don't know, it's frustrating. That's probably the word to use, frustrating. But another player where it's been extremely frustrating, our record signing. And you mentioned Lo Celso and Tanguy Ndombele, between them, £100 million. So, the club quite often get criticised by a lot of Spurs fans saying we don't go out and spend big money. We have. It's evident here. Two players we've spent a lot of money on, and we haven't had that great a deal out of both of them. Tanguy Ndombele is currently on loan at Galatasaray. As I said, record signing. They've got an option to buy him for €15 million in June 2024. A number of reports have come out in the last couple of months stating that he had a bit of a falling out with the manager because he was eating hamburgers at the hotel, etc. But apparently he's now happy there. He wants to stay. He's told their board that he wants to stay. Charlie, what do you make of the Tanguy Ndombele situation? And do you think that Galatasaray may finally buy him and he will leave Spurs on a permanent basis?
I think Tottenham will definitely hope so. I think Tottenham fans burnt their bridges with Ndombele a long time ago. It kind of soured under Antonio Conte before he left to go on loan. I remember the game at home to Morecambe, was it? In the Cup? Yeah. I know his actions didn't go down well in that game. And he's a massive earner. Top earner, I believe, at Tottenham. 200 grand a week or something along those lines. So Tottenham, they'll be desperate to offload him from the wage bill permanently. And I'm sure they've been looking to do that for a couple of years, which is why they've been organising these different loan spells in the hope that he will perform and convince a club to buy him permanently. And there have been spells over the past couple of years where Ndombele's just gone totally quiet. He's not playing. He's fallen out with the manager. He's not fit. He's injured. But I think he was at Napoli last season, I believe, and he did. He was playing well at Napoli. They won the league. He's now at Galatasaray. I'm with you, Chris. I saw those reports about the falling out with the manager. I thought, oh, here we go again. I think that's pretty much what I thought. But he's playing again now, Ndombele. He's playing regularly, and that's it's kind of we're setting the bar pretty low. But the fact that he's playing week in, week out, Ndombele, 15 million permanent buy option is not too daunting, even for a club like Galatasaray. So if he does keep playing, he's got a few more months to impress. He's got every chance of securing that permanent move away, and I'm sure Tottenham will be very keen to make that happen in the summer.
Charlie, while you've been talking about Tanguy Ndombele, Tottenham Hotspur Football Club have just announced the signing of Radu Dragusin. So that deal is now over the line, which I'm absolutely delighted about. And he's also written a goodbye message to the Genoa fans. So do check that out, everyone. Charlie, I've got a last couple of questions for you. Spurs have got a 25% sell-on clause for Sunderland player Jack Clarke, of course, former Tottenham player. A number of Premier League teams are interested in him. Any news on this? Because it's being stated that Sunderland could sell him for around £20 million, giving Tottenham £5 million. Any truth in this, and any update?
It seems like there is truth in it. Lots of Premier League clubs going after him. Jack Clarke, he's having a fantastic season. 12 goals in 26 Championship games, I believe. I think the one thing possibly working against him, we saw him against Newcastle in the Tyne-Wear derby the other day, didn't perform particularly well. He struggled a bit at Spurs. Obviously, he was very young during his time at the club as well. But I think Brentford, Crystal Palace, West Ham, the kind of teams mentioned in relation to Jack Clarke. It's the difficult thing is Sunderland, they're in playoff contention in the Championship. Are they gonna demand a huge transfer sum to lose their best player at this point in the season? And is Jack Clarke going to want to cut short his breakthrough season at Sunderland to secure that Premier League move, or would he rather just see out the campaign? So there's a lot of moving parts in this one, a lot of variables to consider. But I'm sure the interest is genuine. When you're still young, playing on the wing, scoring that many goals from out wide is really impressive. That's a trait that not every winger has, that trait. Having the knack for arriving in the box at the right time. Clearly a really good finisher as well. So I'm sure the interest is genuine. It's just that getting him away from Sunderland at this point in the season will be difficult, and it will take a big sum of money. I'm sure Tottenham will be happy to hear that, given that they'll get a quarter of the transfer fee when it does go through. If not this winter, then most likely in the summer.
Charlie, last question for you. Spurs have been linked with Jota. Of course, he's at the Saudi club Al Ittihad. He moved from Celtic for £25 million. The deal hasn't worked out. Ange Postecoglou knows the player extremely well. Now that Spurs have brought in Timo Werner, would you see this deal happening in January or not?
I would, if I was to bet on it, I would say probably not. One attacker probably enough. I think it's convenient to put 2 and 2 together. Jota, Postecoglou previously worked together. Obviously, his situation out in Saudi Arabia is not good. Jota didn't even get into their Premier League squad, Saudi Pro League squad at Al Ittihad. So his appearances have only been in the Asian Champions League. So it's clear to see why he's unhappy, and I'm sure he's going to be looking for a move back to Europe. And he did put up good numbers working under Postecoglou at Celtic. So there's, he's obviously shown promise. But just because a player and a manager have worked together, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work out in a new setting. We've seen that with Erik ten Hag at Manchester United. Countless signings. Anthony, probably the prime example, where he was brilliant at Ajax. Hasn't worked at all since arriving at Manchester United. And I think, we've not heard a whole lot about Jota to Tottenham, particularly since the Werner deal's gone through. So I would not be surprised to see that one not happen this winter.
Well, Charlie, we've got two over the line now. Timo Werner, of course, announced a couple of days ago. And whilst we've been streaming this podcast, Dragusin has just signed for Tottenham, which is absolutely brilliant news. Very last question for you. At the end of the window, how many signings do you think Postecoglou will have? How many more?
I think, obviously, again, it's the interesting thing with a mid-season window. Injuries could determine whether Spurs need to go after another player, so that we can't forecast that. But I think Spurs do want another central midfielder, and it depends whether they'd rather hold out for Conor Gallagher or whether they just want to get another body in, like you said, one for the future, perhaps a young talent from the Championship. So in an ideal world, one more. I'd be surprised to see more than one. And I know Tottenham fans won't necessarily want to hear this, but there is every chance that the business has already been done with Dragusin and Werner. That's two big boxes ticked there, two priorities boxed off early. And I think a midfielder is the last one remaining. And again, it'll depend on outgoings. If Hojbjerg does find a move away, I think Tottenham will probably ramp up their efforts over the last week of January. So yeah, keep an eye on the midfielder hunt. Other than that, I'm not sure I can see too much else happening.
I remain hopeful. I feel so excited about things right now. And I tell you what, Charlie, I've been so excited since Ange Postecoglou arrived, because he has changed this football club. He's transformed the mood, the spirit, and everything. The mood at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium is like a party atmosphere. It's great. It really is. Yeah. It's a good time to be a Spurs fan right now, and long may this continue. And as you said earlier, we're only 6 points off top spot. You never ever know what can happen in this Premier League season, because no one's running away with it yet. But can I ask you for a score prediction? Manchester United Spurs on Sunday.
It's a great time to play United, and I think it's always a morale boost if you manage to get a win at Old Trafford. And United 1 win in 5, something along those lines. I think Tottenham, they can really put teams to the sword if they turn up and they're in that rhythm, and they kind of smell blood. First 10 minutes they kind of think they've got the beating of United. It could be a comfortable win. I think Tottenham will edge it. I'll go 2-1 Tottenham.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same. Charlie, thanks so much for joining me. You've been a great guest, as per usual. Would love to have you back on in the very near future. Where can people find you and your wonderful work that you do?
Yeah, thanks very much, Chris. You can find me on Twitter at CharlieGordonSJ. Yeah, if you wouldn't mind posting a link to that, Chris, that would be great.
Absolutely.
That, Daily Express website, Express Sport, you can find me on there too.
Charlie, what have you been working on lately with the Daily Express?
Trying hard to get transfer exclusives during January. Working on a lot of darts as well, over Christmas, over the festive period. A bit of tennis. We've got the Australian Open coming up, but it's always busy during the January transfer window. So it is going to be a hectic 3 weeks until that comes to an end.
Well, I know how busy all you journalists are, so it's an absolute pleasure, and I can't thank you enough for your time this evening to talk about Tottenham and the January transfer window. Charlie, thanks so much. Thanks for watching, everyone. Thanks for listening. Until the next time, come on, you Spurs.